Hi, this is Damian Ritchie for EDL 854, Module 12, the case study. So, what do we know about this case study? Um, Mr. Santos is the principal at Briardale Elementary School. He's confident in his position, seems like he's been there for a while. The schools in the district have separate foundations that are chaired by parents to raise funds for supplementary curriculum and materials. Once the funds are raised, they're handed over to the school. The principals place them in budgeted categories for a supplementary curriculum. Mr. Bailey is a new parent to the school and seems to have an ego issue. He's ambitious to raise the most money out of all the schools in the district, especially the school where one of his college friends is the chair of their foundation. So what happened? Well, Mr. Bailey proposed a raffle for cash to be held in the school. The foundation was in support of his idea and they approved it. The tickets were sold the night of the raffle, which, depending on some states, is a good thing or a bad thing. Depending, some states I read that you have to sell them prior, and some had to be the night of. The sheriff department showed up just as the first ticket was about to be drawn, and Mr. Bailey ended up being booked and put on probation. This left a blemish for the Briardale Elementary in terms of negative publicity. So what went wrong? Well, the foundation for Briardale Elementary should have known or looked into the Massachusetts laws involving cash raffles for a nonprofit. By state law, a permit needs to be acquired in town hall or city hall um, by the foundation prior to the beginning of the raffle. These are usually, I checked, anywhere from $15 to $30 depending on your city or town. Though the intention for the raffle was not criminal, the law is the law, and following a simple protocol could have saved the school this embarrassment. So who should oversee the foundation and their activity? Well, since the foundation for each school has a good relationship for the schools and collaborate for specific causes, the school should help the foundations as much as possible in terms of organizing volunteers or questions that they need. Um, this may be as simple as making lines of communications between a point person in each school or an individual in City Hall that can help these foundations double check that they don't make this same mistake again, maybe help them with auditing, which I'll get to in the future, um, and just general ideas on space and permits and whatnot. Legal considerations. In the Massachusetts state law, like I said earlier, permits required for a cash raffle. Permits can only be obtained by a qualified nonprofit organization, so you can't just make one up on the spot. You need to have documentation proving it. There is no law on internet raffles, so this is kind of uncharted territory for some fundraisers. Um, the raffle ticket seller and buyer each must sign the ticket that you use for the raffle. And schools are not allowed to hold a cash raffle, so this creates a whole can of worm of gray areas. If schools aren't allowed to hold cash raffles, then should it be allowed to be held in a school? Can a school advertise for it? Can a school resources be used to promote it? Like, could the foundation use the copy machine to print out copies? Or maybe the principal posts something on social media to remind parents of the event. So those are all school resources, and like I said, it's a gray area that hasn't been touched yet, but is something to consider for the future. Who should chair school foundations? Well, in my opinion, to prevent a conflict of interest and the potential questions of legality, uh, as I said previously, schools cannot hold cash raffles. It should be a non-employee of the school to lead the organization, even if, let's say you're a parent and a teacher for a child in the school. Nonetheless, you are an employee of the school, and I would think to best steer clear of any potential legality issues. Uh, Though it doesn't necessarily have to be a parent. For example, in our district in Rockland, a retired principal leads the Rockland Education Foundation, and it's fantastic. He does a great job because he was a principal for 35 years, and almost everybody in town has either had him as their principal or knows who he is and respects him. So he's not a parent, but he does a great job of leading the foundation. How to help parents stay in compliance. So I think as a principal, you should make a guide for parents that can be a useful resource in terms of raising monies and just what all happens once that money is raised. Uh, like I said, that line of communication, have a point person, maybe in the school, maybe somebody in town hall if you have multiple schools. That's their point person that they could check in with to see if they're going to potentially violate anything or that they're in compliance. Maybe even network through other districts to organize info nights and have resources come to them in a presentation for surrounding towns for all potential parents or active parents that are in foundations in terms of fundraising. Uh, a responsibility to protect the image of the school. Though the foundations that raise the money for the schools are technically their own entity, like I said, they are attached to the school's name. So it is something that leaders of the school should always be aware of, that those foundations are in the up and up and there isn't any negativity attached to them. Schools should work to have that really strong relationship with these groups and emphasize that using the school's name means that the school has an interest in their activity because it is a direct reflection to the school. Building this relationship ensures potential negative affiliation and helps the foundation sustain compatibility. Auditing. Cover this a lot this class. So the foundation should have an auditing process in its bylaws. Members can learn from the school's community or how to appoint members to handle the books. Let's say somebody's an accountant that's one of the volunteers in the foundation, then they should be the treasurer, or multiple accountants. When I was in my daughter's school foundation, that's what we did and it worked out well. Part of the funds that are raised should be allocated each year for an audit, just to make sure that everything is in line. The results of the audit should be reviewed by the school's principals and the town auditor. Um, Everything needs to be clear and easily seen to prevent any possibility of people questioning what's going on. So the case study, was the principal responsible? So I guess you could say in a court of law, Principal Santos is technically not responsible for what happened during the raffle because the foundation are their own entity. However, in the court of popular opinion, he will be responsible or at least attached to what happened. His name is attached to the school, and this negativity will be attached to him regardless. We know the foundation president, Bailey, is new, so this should have alerted Mr. Santos, who seemed to had confidence in how the foundation have been running for the past few years. A new person may mean they may not know some things. A simple just checking in, but did you get a permit for the raffle could have saved a boatload of trouble in this situation. How to prevent future mishaps. Sometimes the best approach is to take ownership of the faults even when you're not and move on. So Mr. Santos, the principal, could say, that was my bad for not checking in on you. Let's work to make this better next time. Like I said, that close relationship, working close with those foundations will prevent stuff like this from happening. Uh, the foundation needs to be assured of standards and procedures so that next events will be successful. So how will this affect the school? Well, the foundation for Brydale will be upset, and based on my parent organization experience, there will be plenty of finger pointing going on. This negativity may cause a drop in participation, which won't be a good thing. The budget for supplementary education will probably be less than expected because of this fundraiser flop, and the reputation of the school will be tarnished for a bit. And there may be a target now on Mr. Santos's back from the stakeholders because of this. So how can the principal recuperate lost funds? Well, Mr. Santos must rebuild. He has to rebuild a relationship between him and Mr. Bailey. rebuild a relationship between him and the foundation and between him and the stakeholders in the community. Help Mr. Bailey keep that enthusiasm. Meet with him, encourage him to have another fundraiser. Even poke fun at the situation. You can create something like Get Mr. Bailey Out of Jail fundraiser and ask local police to be part of the event. This shows that you have taken ownership, that you've moved past it to the point that you could, in a sense, poke fun of it. Um, how to allocate the current funds? Well, the failure of the fundraising should be a wake-up call uh, to not count your chickens before they hatch, so plan on lower supplementary income for the following school year. This means have your teachers audit their resources. This is now where you have to make sure what do we really, really, really need versus what do we really, really, really want. And so when you have a tough year, you got to squeeze every penny. And building for future budgets for supplementary materials, um, I would tweak their approach. I would say, let's say you raise $1,000. Each year, it should always be take 50% of that and put it into into an account. You can spend the 500. When there's a tough year, you always will have that savings that you've been accumulating um, in that account, and then potentially as that grows, you can set a limit. You know, when it reaches X amount of money or after X amount of years, you can buy a really big ticket resource and make sure you publicize all of these from the small to the large because it just shows that one, the foundation is doing well and you're doing well as a school leader. So responsible use of resources. Priority should always be focused on using the guaranteed funds for base curriculum. You also need to set money aside for surprise costs like McKinney-Vento, where transportation from an out of place or an out of place placement for a student can become very expensive. And I feel that all purchases should meet the following criteria. Does the purchase align with the school vision? Is it a quality purchase? Is it backed by data and do you need it? So how do you deal with budget cuts? Maintain what you have. I know people hate it, but I always get on my students that they don't own the books. So unless they want to pay for it, take care of it. Up here in the north, heating is a very costly problem in the winter, and so limiting access to teachers and temperature control actually ends up saving thousands of dollars. If classroom size increases, two paraprofessionals can change the teacher ratio from then hiring one new teacher. So you can have a 1 to 15 student to faculty ratio as opposed to a 1 to 20 student to faculty ratio. Are there other resources for schools? There's always grants and endowments. Um, Individual programs can raise their own money, and our local MTA, Massachusetts Teachers Association, lobbies on state level for funding. Competing interests for budgets in Rockland, the high school and middle school share the same publishing budget, but the elementary schools have their own individual one, which causes a rift. Technology, we're trying to get a one-to-one student laptop ratio, and every year each department wants a new staff member. So thank you, and looking forward to seeing everybody else's.